The diner fell silent except for the sound of a baby's soft whimper and the cruel laughter of three women in booth 7. Maya Rodriguez stood frozen near their table, her 6-month-old daughter Aria strapped to her chest in a worn fabric carrier, tears threatening to spill from her exhausted eyes as the women's mocking voices cut through the morning air like shattered glass. She had worked double shifts for 2 weeks straight. Her babysitter had quit without notice that very morning, and she had made the impossible choice between losing her job or bringing her baby to work. Now, as these women ridiculed her desperation, calling her unprofessional and demanding to see the manager, Maya felt the weight of her entire world crushing down on her shoulders. She was 23 years old, alone in a city where she knew no one, and she was failing at the one thing that mattered most, keeping her daughter safe and fed. The humiliation burned hotter than the coffee pot she clutched in her trembling hand. One of the women, dripping in designer clothes and contempt, had just loudly proclaimed that people like Maya shouldn't have children if they couldn't afford proper childcare, her voice carrying across the entire restaurant. The other diners had gone quiet, some looking away in discomfort, others staring with judgment in their eyes. Maya wanted to disappear, to run out the door and never come back. But she couldn't afford that luxury. This job at Bernie's diner was all that stood between her and homelessness, between her baby and hunger. So she stood there, absorbing their cruelty, preparing to apologize for the sin of being poor and alone when a voice from the corner booth changed everything. If you believe in kindness and standing up for those who need it most, please hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and share this story with someone who needs to hear it today. We read every comment, so tell us where you're watching from and share your thoughts on what happens next. The man who stood up was unremarkable at first glance. Average height, wearing faded jeans and a simple button-down shirt, with tired lines around his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and heavy responsibilities. His name was Marcus Chen, and he had been sitting quietly in the corner for the past 20 minutes, working on his laptop while his own 7-year-old son, Julian, colored pictures beside him. Marcus had noticed Maya the moment she walked in with the baby, had seen the exhaustion in her movements, the careful way she tried to keep the infant quiet while taking orders and refilling coffee cups. He had watched the whole cruel scene unfold, and something inside him, something that remembered his own desperate times, his own moments of being judged for circumstances beyond his control, simply refused to stay silent any longer. Marcus walked across the diner with quiet purpose, his footsteps drawing every eye in the room. He stopped at booth 7 and looked directly at the 3 women who had been so quick to mock a struggling mother. His voice when he spoke was calm, but carried the weight of absolute conviction. He told them that he couldn't help but overhear their conversation, and he wanted to share something with them. 2 years ago, he had been exactly where Maya was now. His wife had died suddenly from an undiagnosed heart condition, leaving him alone with a 5-year-old son and a mountain of medical debt. He had lost his corporate job because he couldn't maintain the demanding hours while caring for Julian. He had brought his son to job interviews, to the grocery store, to the park at 2 in the morning when the nightmares came and neither of them could sleep. He had been judged, pitied, and dismissed by countless people who looked at him and saw failure instead of a father fighting with everything he had. The women's faces had shifted from smugness to discomfort, but Marcus wasn't finished. He explained that the only reason he was standing here today, running his own successful digital marketing firm, able to choose his own hours and provide for his son, was because of the people who had shown him kindness when he needed it most. The elderly neighbor who watched Julian for free when Marcus had important meetings. The hiring manager who gave him freelance work when no one else would. The waitress at a different diner who used to slip extra food onto Julian's plate when she thought Marcus wasn't looking. Those small acts of compassion had kept him going when he wanted to give up, had reminded him that the world wasn't entirely cruel, that there was still hope worth fighting for. He turned to Maya then, this young woman who looked like she was holding herself together with nothing but willpower and prayer, and he offered her something she hadn't expected, genuine help with no strings attached. He handed her his business card, and told her that his company was looking for someone to help with administrative tasks, data entry, and client communications. The work could be done entirely from home, on her own schedule, and the pay was 3 times what she was making at the diner. He had seen her juggle multiple tables with efficiency and grace while caring for an infant, which told him everything he needed to know about her ability to multitask and handle pressure. If she was interested, she should call him on Monday. Maya stared at the card in her shaking hand, unable to process what was happening. She had woken up that morning convinced that this would be the day she finally broke, the day everything fell apart. Now this stranger, this man who understood her struggle in a way that cut straight to her soul, was offering her a lifeline. She tried to thank him, but the words caught in her throat, tangled up with relief and disbelief and a gratitude so profound it made her chest ache. Marcus simply smiled, the kind of smile that said he knew exactly how she felt because he had been there too, and told her that everyone deserves a chance to survive with dignity intact. The 3 women in booth 7 had gone silent, their earlier cruelty hanging in the air like a shameful ghost. One of them, the youngest, had tears in her eyes. She reached for her wallet and pulled out several bills, placing them on the table and quietly saying she was sorry, that she hadn't thought about what might be behind the situation, that she should have known better than to judge. The other 2 followed suit, their generous tips a small attempt at redemption for their thoughtless words. They left the diner quickly, not quite meeting Maya's eyes, carrying the weight of their own conscience. The manager, who had been heading toward the table to address the complaint, stopped in his tracks. Bernie himself, a gruff man in his 60s who had owned the diner for 30 years, had seen the entire exchange. He walked over to Maya and did something he rarely did. He apologized. He told her she should have come to him about the babysitter situation, that they could have figured something out, that she was one of his best workers, and he didn't want to lose her. He also told her that if she decided to take Marcus's job offer, he understood completely, but she would always have a place at Bernie's if she ever needed it. There would be no hard feelings, only respect for a young mother doing whatever it took to provide for her child. The rest of Maya's shift passed in a blur of kindness that felt almost surreal after the morning's harsh beginning. Regular customers who had witnessed the scene left larger tips than usual, some with encouraging notes tucked under their plates. An elderly woman named Mrs. Patterson, who came in every Friday for the early bird special, pressed a worn children's book into Maya's hand and told her that her own daughter had loved that story, and she wanted Aria to have it. Another customer, a middle-aged businessman, quietly paid for several other people's meals and told Bernie to put it on his tab as a thank you for employing someone who clearly worked as hard as Maya did. The small acts accumulated like drops of water filling an empty well, each one a reminder that cruelty and judgment weren't the only forces in the world. That night, after her shift ended and she had fed Aria and put her down to sleep in their tiny studio apartment, Maya sat on the edge of her second-hand couch and allowed herself to cry. Not the bitter tears of humiliation and despair that had threatened earlier, but tears of relief and overwhelming gratitude and the fragile, terrifying hope that maybe things could actually get better. She looked at Marcus's business card for the 100th time, running her thumb over the embossed letters, still half convinced it would disappear or turn out to be some kind of cruel joke. But it was real, solid in her hand, and it represented a possibility she had stopped allowing herself to imagine. Stability. The ability to be present for her daughter without sacrificing their survival. A chance to build something more than just a desperate day-to-day existence. On Monday morning, Maya called the number on the card with shaking hands and a racing heart. Marcus answered on the second ring, his voice warm and welcoming, as if he had been expecting and hoping for her call. They talked for an hour about the position, the responsibilities, the flexible schedule that would allow her to work while Aria napped or played. He asked about her computer skills, her organizational abilities, her comfort with learning new software. Maya answered honestly, acknowledging the gaps in her experience, but emphasizing her willingness to learn, her dedication, her desperate need to prove herself worthy of this opportunity. Marcus listened carefully and then told her something that made her eyes fill with tears once again. He said he wasn't looking for someone with a perfect resume or extensive credentials. He was looking for someone who understood the value of a second chance, who would bring heart and determination to the work because they knew what it meant to fight for something that mattered. Based on everything he had seen and heard, she was exactly the person he wanted on his team. Maya started the following Monday, working from her apartment while Arya played in her playpen nearby. The learning curve was steep. She had to familiarize herself with new software, learn the particular communication style Marcus's clients expected, manage schedules and deadlines while caring for a baby who didn't understand the concept of work hours. There were moments of frustration, times when she wanted to call Marcus and admit she couldn't do it, instances where she felt like she was failing at everything simultaneously. But Marcus was patient, understanding when she needed to reschedule a video call because Arya was sick, offering encouragement when she made mistakes, celebrating when she successfully handled a difficult client situation. He remembered what it was like to be drowning in responsibility and self-doubt, and he made sure she never felt alone in her struggle. Within 3 months, Maya had not only proven herself capable, but had become an invaluable part of Marcus's team. She had a natural talent for client relations, a warmth and genuine interest in people that translated beautifully through email and phone conversations. She streamlined several administrative processes, saving the company time and money. She took initiative, suggesting improvements and taking on additional responsibilities as her confidence grew. Marcus increased her pay twice, not because she asked, but because he believed in compensating people fairly for the value they brought. For the first time since her daughter was born, Maya could pay her bills without panic, could buy groceries without calculating every single item, could take Arya to the pediatrician when she was sick without worrying about the cost. The transformation went deeper than financial stability. Maya began to smile more, to sleep better, to dream about possibilities beyond mere survival. She enrolled in an online business course, thinking about her future, about maybe one day running her own company like Marcus did. She made friends with other remote workers in the company, built a support network of people who understood the challenges of balancing work and parenthood. She moved to a better apartment with a real bedroom for Arya, space for her to grow and play safely. Every good thing that happened felt like a small miracle, a gift she had never expected to receive. Marcus watched her flourish with the quiet satisfaction of someone who understood that helping others succeed was its own reward. He and Maya developed a friendship built on mutual respect and shared understanding of how quickly life could change, how a single moment of kindness could alter someone's entire trajectory. Julian and Arya had playdates, the two children forming their own bond while their parents worked or talked about business strategies and life challenges. Marcus shared the story of his late wife with Maya, the grief that still caught him off guard at unexpected moments, the fear of failing his son that haunted his quiet hours. Maya talked about Arya's father, who had disappeared the moment he learned about the pregnancy, about the loneliness of being young and abandoned and terrified of getting everything wrong. 6 months after that day at Bernie's diner, Marcus's company landed its biggest client yet, a contract that would require expanding the team and taking on significantly more work. He called Maya into a video meeting and offered her a promotion to operations manager, a role that would involve overseeing other remote workers, managing projects, and working directly with clients on strategic initiatives. The salary was more than double what she was currently making, enough to think about buying a car, about saving for Arya's future, about building the kind of stable life she had thought was reserved for other people. Maya accepted through tears of disbelief and joy, still sometimes shocked by how radically her circumstances had changed, because one man decided that kindness mattered more than convenience. The story of what happened at the diner had spread through the small community in unexpected ways. The 3 women who had mocked Maya that day reached out to her separately, each offering sincere apologies and, in one case, a job reference when she learned Maya was looking to advance her career. Bernie's Diner put up a small sign announcing they were now a family-friendly establishment welcoming parents who needed to bring their children to work in emergency situations. Mrs. Patterson became an unofficial grandmother to Aria, babysitting occasionally and delighting in watching the little girl grow. The businessman who had paid for meals that day started a local fund to help service workers in crisis, inspired by witnessing both the cruelty Maya faced and the kindness that followed. One moment of standing up had rippled outward in ways no one could have predicted. If this story has touched your heart, if you believe in the power of compassion to change lives, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment about what this story meant to you, and share it with someone who needs to be reminded that kindness still exists in this world. Your engagement helps us reach more people with these important messages. Before we reach the end, please take a moment to comment below and tell us, have you ever stood up for someone who was being treated unfairly? Or has someone stood up for you when you needed it most? We'd love to hear your stories. 2 years later, Maya stood in front of a small crowd at a local community center, sharing her story as part of a panel on overcoming adversity and building successful careers against the odds. Aria, now a bright and talkative 2-year-old, sat in the front row with Julian, who had appointed himself her unofficial big brother and protector. Marcus sat beside the children, watching Maya speak with confidence and poise about her journey from desperation to stability, from being mocked and humiliated to thriving and helping others. She talked about that day at the diner not as the worst moment of her life, but as the beginning of everything good that followed, because one person chose to see her humanity instead of her circumstances, chose compassion instead of judgment, chose to stand up when it would have been easier to stay seated and mind his own business. In the audience, several of the other women on the panel nodded in recognition, each carrying their own stories of struggle and survival, of the moments when someone's kindness had made the difference between giving up and pushing forward. After the panel ended, young women approached Maya with tears in their eyes, sharing their own battles with poverty, single parenthood, discrimination, and exhaustion. She listened to each one with the patience and understanding that came from having lived it herself. And when they asked for advice, she told them what Marcus had shown her, that accepting help wasn't weakness, that your current circumstances didn't define your worth, that the world was full of both cruelty and compassion, and you got to choose which one you put back into it. Maya had started her own initiative by then, working with local restaurants and businesses to create emergency childcare options for workers who had no other choice but to bring their children to work. She had partnered with community organizations to provide resources and job training for single parents, using her own experience to shape programs that addressed real needs instead of theoretical problems. Marcus's company had become one of the sponsors, and together they had helped dozens of people find stable employment that accommodated the realities of their lives. The work was challenging and often heartbreaking, but it filled Maya with a sense of purpose she had never experienced before. The knowledge that her suffering had meaning, that she could transform her own painful experiences into something that helped others avoid or overcome similar struggles. As the evening ended and people began to leave, Marcus caught Maya's eye across the room and gave her a smile that needed no words. It was a smile of pride and recognition, of shared understanding between two people who knew what it meant to be broken and to rebuild, to be judged and to choose kindness anyway. Julian and Aria were already planning their next playdate, their innocent laughter a reminder of why any of this mattered, why standing up against cruelty and choosing compassion was always worth the risk. In that moment, surrounded by people whose lives had been touched by ripples of kindness that started with one man standing up in a diner, Maya felt something she had once thought impossible, complete and genuine hope for the future. The world was still hard, still full of people who judged without understanding, who mocked instead of helping. But it was also full of people like Marcus, like Mrs. Patterson, like Bernie and the reformed women from Booth 7, like every person in this room who had chosen to see beyond someone's current struggle to their inherent worth and potential. Maya had learned that one act of kindness could change not just a single life, but create waves of change that touched countless others. She had learned that her darkest moment could become the foundation of her greatest strength. Most importantly, she had learned that being vulnerable, being human, being in need of help wasn't something to be ashamed of. It was the thing that connected all people, the common ground where compassion could take root and grow into something beautiful and transformative. As she drove home that night with Arya sleeping peacefully in the back seat, Maya thought about the young woman she had been 2 years ago, standing in that diner with tears burning in her eyes and despair crushing her chest, certain that she had no future worth imagining. She wished she could reach back through time and tell that desperate girl that help was coming, that kindness existed, that her story wasn't ending but just beginning. She wished she could show her the life that was waiting on the other side of that humiliation. The career, the stability, the friendships, the sense of purpose, the ability to help others the way she had been helped. Most of all, she wished she could tell her that the cruelty of those women in booth 7 would fade into insignificance compared to the enduring impact of one man who decided that standing up for a stranger mattered more than staying comfortable and uninvolved. But she couldn't reach back, couldn't change the past or ease that younger version of herself's pain. All she could do was move forward, carrying the lessons she had learned, extending the same compassion to others that had been extended to her. And that, Maya realized as she pulled into her apartment parking lot and carefully lifted her sleeping daughter from the car seat, was exactly enough. More than enough. It was everything that mattered, the only legacy worth leaving, proof that even in the darkest moments, even when the world seemed determined to crush your spirit and mock your struggles, there were still people who would stand up, speak out, and remind you that you were worthy of dignity, respect, and a chance to build something better. The lights in her apartment welcomed her home, a space of safety and possibility that she had fought for and earned. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, its own opportunities to choose between cynicism and hope, between judgment and compassion. But tonight, Maya held her daughter close and whispered a thank you to the universe, to Marcus, to everyone who had ever chosen kindness when cruelty would have been easier. Tonight, she let herself believe in the goodness that persisted despite everything, the human capacity for grace that could transform shame into strength and desperation into determination. Tonight, she rested in the truth that standing up for someone who couldn't stand up for themselves wasn't just a nice gesture. It was the very thing that held the world together, the invisible thread connecting all humanity in a web of potential compassion, waiting to be activated by anyone brave enough to simply care.